Dorothy Squires has always inspired extraordinary loyalty in her fans and enthusiasm in her audiences. In her long career as a singer, she's known success and the wilderness. She's been in and out of the hit parade many times, and in and out of the newspapers, too. A highly controversial character, she's attracted as much publicity away from the microphone as in front of it. Court actions and legal battles, her own battle to assert her star quality when promoters didn't want to know, the public acrimony between her and Roger Moore, all freshly described in her autobiography, Rain, Rain, Go Away.
The only reason I wrote this book was to put the record straight. I was so sick of having mud flung at me. I was being smothered by it. And I was so sick of the garbage that I was reading and the things I was hearing. So I just had to get that book out to vindicate myself.
Dorothy's undertaken a nationwide appearance tour to promote the record released with her book. She says she must because the normal radio and television outlets aren't available to her. Indeed, she's been saying for 10 years that for some reason the establishment in the entertainment business is anti-Dorothy Squires. This led to the famous occasion 6 years ago when Dorothy hired the London Palladium off her own bat and achieved a sellout and a considerable personal triumph.
We have a tremendous monopoly in the business. We have one of the most devastating monopolies in show business as such. It's frightening.
In Britain?
In Britain, certainly. I've worked in practically every country in the world, and I've never known a monopoly. And, incidentally, I have taken the monopoly very much to task. They can't hurt me anymore. They need me. Now, there are no theaters. They can't hurt me. I don't suppose I'll ever televise for the people I'm talking about. I'm namely talking about the establishment. In other words, Lord Grey, Lord Delphine, and Leslie Grey.
Well, why didn't your face fit?
How does one know? You see, if you dare say, how dare you be a success and hire the Palladium and back it and prove them wrong? I've done nothing to them. But if you can't do that, I was knocking my head against a brick wall. And one of the questions, because that was a night I shall never forget in my entire life. It was sold out in 12 hours. I had already booked the Grand Theatre in Wolverhampton, and I was driving along Old Kent Road one day, and I was going into the record company. I had an appointment with the managing director, and I heard a screech of brakes, and it was me. I was almost into the back of the bus, and I said I was talking to myself. I said, what am I doing in the ground in Wolverhampton? I'm going to hire the Palladium. I've been in the chart for 15 months with 3 records. That means the public wants me.
She is a great singer. We like her. Yeah.
Can you come over here? Just why are you here tonight?
Well, because we like her. I think she's absolutely smashing. And we hope she'll have a good comeback.
And you?
Yeah, she is marvellous. And that's why I've come. She's a very good singer. I think so.
If anybody wants a ticket to go anywhere in London, they come to you. What about a ticket for here tonight?
Oh, I think it's almost impossible. I've never seen anything like it. This is fantastic. I think that what Dorothy Squires has done is the greatest thing what the entertainment world has needed. She's been a lone wolf, so the Delphons and everybody has said, and she's proved everybody wrong.
Now, if I could buy tickets tonight, what would I have to pay for it, do you think?
I think you'd have to pay about £10 or £15.
There was a big press conference afterwards, and I was in the Palladium for 2 hours after. And a lot of the press guys, gentlemen of the press, they wanted some answers. And Jack Lewis of the Daily Mirror said to me, and I quoted on the LP of that particular sleeve of 1970, the London Palladium 1970, I quote Jack's question and my answer. And he says, Dorothy, do you think you've knocked the wall down? Do you think you... I said, I haven't even chipped it. And I haven't. And I don't give it... I couldn't care less. But I have proved that if the public wants you, they come in and see you.
But does the other hold good? Are you suggesting that no matter whether you're talented or not, there is an establishment that will get you through?
Listen, I'm an authority on that. I have talent on bills with me that it's frightening. They're never going to see the light of day. They'll be playing me these clubs and theatres at the second and first turn. They'll never get out of it because if their face doesn't fit, they'll never become a star.
I don't know where they found some of these pictures, you know?
I never knew they. I
never knew they existed.
Because that was my brother there.
Yes, but we presumed. Yeah. He died at 32 with a kidney disease. Which one was that? My brother. Who was that? Captain Squires.
Is that his daughter, I think, with you? Yes, it is.
Yeah. His mother.
My father's great aunt were the Madame Patty opera company, and my mother's side, if you could call it show business, was in the fairground business, you know.
How did you start singing then?
Well, I guess from about 2.5 really, Vincent, and that's how the title of this book, the book had written, my autobiography came into it.
Rain, Rain, Go Away.
Yes, and which is the title of the new LP as well. When I was a kid of about 2.5, all the people Achting went, you know, toilets were out in the garden. They were always embellished with lovely, the beautiful rose trees, you know. And there are in some remote parts of Pontevedra and all that. They still have them in the garden, you know. So it was pouring with rain, and I can remember it distinctly. And I put my hand up on the wall and I said, "Rain, rain, go away, little Nana wants to pee." You know, because everybody applauded. The ham even then came out, you know. So because they laughed and applauded at that, I always, that little degree always became a sort of, it was synonymous to me. This is why I put it down. This is why I titled the book, because before I did anything like play or laugh or cry, "Rain, rain, go away, little Nana wants to cry," I'd sing this to you before if I was going to cry. 2 men in my life. That doesn't mean to say I'm a lousy lover. but I'm an unfortunate. I always envy, in a way, a person that can jump in the sack with anybody. But I'm not like that. I've got to love them very much before I do that. But Billy Reed, I lived with for 8 years. He was a great deal older than I was. He was a brilliant musician, a brilliant writer, one of the most prolific writers this generation has ever seen, or this century will ever see. He wrote the words and the music. I mean, he had 5 in this order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in the hit parade at once. I mean, he had 3 in the American hit parade for 3 years running, 1, 2, and 3. And he was fantastic. But, you see, we employed 40 people. And then one day I just couldn't take any more. Jealousy was ridiculous. I couldn't, he'd have me followed. He had no reason to, but he'd have me followed. And in the end, I just couldn't take it any longer. And I'd invested, and it was a lot of money for me then, 10,000 in a Fiat in Llanelli. And one morning, after the pantomime was over, I just got in my car, and I write about this in the book. And I drove away. I couldn't take any more. I'd lost 2 stone of weight with this insane jealousy. But I'd like to say that...
How long were you with him?
I was 8 years with him. But I think it was his genius. Well, I mean, genius is the razor edge of insanity, isn't it, really? Sure. So it was his genius that almost made him paranoid. You know what I mean? Yeah. And a turbulent life. I had a wonderful 10-year marriage with Roger. It was a super marriage. He was a friend of a Llanelli girl that had lived in my lodge, Betty Newman. And it was incredible, actually. She came into me, and I had given a party for Norman Newell, who was my recording manager. And there was Pet Clark and Charles Coburn, the American actor, and, you know, there was a lot there. And she said, "Do you mind if I invite him?" I said, "No, not at all." So that was Kismet fate, if you like. And he came later in the party, and then I don't know what arrangements she'd made with him, how he was going to get there. I didn't even know he was coming, you know, I wasn't concerned. And the telephone, I was passing the library, you know, and the telephone, and I picked up the telephone, and he said, "I'm at the station. Betty said you'd send a car down." I said, "Who are you?" "Roger Moore." "Well," I said, "what do you look like?" So he said, I'm short, fat, and bald. So I went back and I said, somebody go down the station and get a short, fat, bald guy, you know. So anyway, about 10 or 15 minutes later, I was milling around, you know, and Betty said, this is Roger Moore. I said, how do you do? Would you have a drink? So he said, I have an ulcer. So, I said, I am sorry. He said, don't be sorry. It's quite fashionable. I thought, oh, what a bore. It's quite fashionable. I thought, who writes his script, you know? However, that's when I met him. And that association was to last for 10 years.
It was a love match, was it, between you?
Very much so. Very much so.
But their marriage broke down. Roger Moore, seen here working on The Spy Who Loved Me, fell for the Italian actress Louisa Mattioli, and that was that. But not for Dorothy. She refused to divorce him until 1968, by which time Roger's children by Louisa were aged 5 and 2. The differences between the parties received the full play of publicity. From first to last, it was a very public separation, and still is.
I never went on vacation with Roger ever. Now, I should have been there at the hotel with the kettle or bed, because tea, you couldn't get tea, you couldn't, and there was nobody there. So really, it was my fault. But on the other hand, you could say, if I'd have done this, if I'd have done, but for that. But the ifs and buts of our lives aren't ours to define. You know, that old guy upstairs gets them all in perspective, in good time. Do you know what I mean?
But why all the bitterness afterwards? When it was obvious that he'd gone and he didn't want to come back.
No, hang on. You're quite wrong there. When you say, you read, you are now quoting something you have read.
That's right.
When you read my book, you will read the truth. Roger went and came back about 7 times before he finally, and it was I eventually had to do something about it. But the bitterness came. Now, nobody can help falling in love. This is an emotion none of us have control over. But there always has to be, I think, integrity, tying up the loose ends, seeing that everything is done with the least amount of hurt. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And any divorce, doesn't matter what the circumstances are, there's always a tremendous hurt. It doesn't, you know, it's never, it can never be avoided. But you see, if it was a disintegration of a marriage quickly, you know, if it was disintegrated, I'm sorry, months before that. But it really wasn't, because I was getting letters 2 a day, you know, and phone calls. And he was behind the Iron Curtain, and to get a phone call through it was virtually almost impossible, you know.
You were very hurt then?
Well, wouldn't you be?
I suppose so.
My God, wouldn't you be? I mean, we just spent about, I suppose, $35,000 on our penthouse. And we'd only lived in it 4 weeks, you know, so we'd only come over to England for about 2 months. So hurt, it wasn't so much that. My legs were cut from under me. My arms were chopped off. In other words, I was dazed. I didn't know what it was all about. And I didn't know where he was for months and months and months and months. I didn't know anything about it. Now, this is what I mean. Bitterness comes. I'm not bitter to Roger. I'm very bitter to the Italian lady.